Thank you, everyone, for joining me on this week's episode of Sitting Down with Scholars. I'm joined by Chris. And Chris, can you start by telling myself and my guests about a bit more about your career in research so far?
Yeah, so thanks, Jordan, for having me. So a little bit about my research. I am doing a PhD in biomedical engineering at University of Cincinnati and completing the research at Cincinnati Children's Hospital. Essentially, my research is looking at respiratory diseases and neonates. So I apply computational fluid dynamics, or CFD for short, um, to 3D models that we get from neonatal MRI. And with the CFD models, we can tell resistance, velocity, and a bunch of different things, calculations in these simulations to give us more answers about how babies are breathing. Yeah, so neonates specifically, I originally wanted to do more cardiovascular research. Um, and before my PhD, I worked at Lockheed Martin for a year. So I was developing things for NASA, trying to get astronauts to the moon and then eventually to Mars. So with that aerospace background, um, my current advisor, Alistair, he was an aerospace engineer, and he's like, "Hey, I know you want to do cardiovascular, but Cincinnati Children's, we have a lot of neonatal work." So what pushed me to say yes was the institution and seeing that Cincinnati Children's was like the number one children's hospital, and realizing that like before even getting to cardiovascular, problems later in life, you have to be born first. So it's like if we can diagnose a lot of these respiratory diseases that affect different brain diseases or cardiovascular diseases, um, then maybe the likelihood of somebody having uh, high blood pressure later in life depends on how they're breathing at the beginning of life.
So very much more on the prevention side rather than the cure and treatment side, to summarize. But I suppose one thing that will be quite fascinating for most people is the transition from, I would say, what most people imagine when they think engineer, technical, working on big machines, developing these various different technologies that we use, and then the pivot into more bioengineering, working with not only equipment, which I would presume is still I'm presuming you're still going to be working with various different, probably very expensive technology, if not possibly more so than was in some areas of aerospace, but equally understanding the connection between the machine and the neonates, and potentially I'd assume it has some applications in older children as well as in adults as well, because typically most systems I'd imagine get adapted after trials.
Yeah. Yep. So going back to the first part, yeah, the machines are definitely very expensive. So this will go into like more of the like medical imaging side. So we look at MRI, and some people in my lab look at CT as well. But the problem with CT is that's like that's radiation. So you don't want to give radiation to babies who just joined this earth like 2 weeks ago, and start them off that way. So MRI is non-radiation, so that's why we prefer MRI. But either way are like super expensive. A lot of times these babies, just with all the different equipment, being intubated, then respiratory support, it costs a lot of money. There's some papers out there that show that like some medical bills for the first few years of life can get up to about $1 million. So yeah, very expensive for a family that just gave birth and turned their life around.
Yeah, I mean, as someone from the UK who medical costs doesn't really have to isn't really the top of our concerns, I completely sympathise with many of the families out there who will be experiencing that. But equally, I suppose from a research point of view, that part of the challenge will be your sample base, because I'd imagine when you're working with machines in more of an engineering setting, you can try it in various different settings. You can compare, whereas the individuals, the babies, and the families that are involved in this, you're working with very sick children, and as a result, that you can't effectively, ethically, I'd imagine, trial any form of intervention or machinery on, for argument's sake, other neonates who are otherwise healthy, because there'd be no ethical justification that I can imagine someone giving permission for. So you're not using animal models by any chance as well, are you, to get around that?
Yeah, I'm not using any animal models. Some of the adjacent labs are using animal models, but they're specifically looking at the lungs, and different MRI diffusion techniques. So they use animal models, but it's funny because you mentioned like the healthy subjects. Throughout my whole PhD, I was like, there's no way we're just gonna walk into a room and we're like, hey, we know you just had a baby, but we'd love to image your baby and we'll give you guys a little bit of money. So my advisor, we did get one healthy subject a few weeks ago, and we have a new neonatal scanner. One, I think it is. I think it is the first of its kind. Because most MRIs, it fits, adult body. But this MRI is just specific for a neonate, so it's very small. But we imaged a healthy baby on there, so now we have at least one, which is a lot more than most labs have, because most families aren't going to agree to putting their baby in a loud machine. So
I suppose one of the things that, as we've touched on briefly, what was the point that really drove you from that transition from engineering into bioengineering? Or potentially a career in a mix of the biological sciences with engineering overall? What's driving you down this path?
Yeah, so I've always, I think when I was in high school, I wanted to I initially wanted to do music, but I was like, okay, that's more of a hobby. But initially, I wanted to do more of like molecular biology and stuff like that, to kind of like work at the CDC. So I've always had like a passion of wanting to learn more about diseases and generally just help people. That's my passion, is helping people. So when I became an engineer, after I finished, I was originally a computer engineer, and I worked at Lockheed, and I was building stuff for people to go to Mars and to the moon. And although it like sounds cool that I'm building stuff for NASA, I wanted to be more like directly impactful to humans, to people. Um, so I worked there for a year, and I realized that like working in industry as an engineer just generally didn't fulfill my passion. So I applied to biomedical engineering here at UC, and I don't regret it at all. Definitely like fuels my passion. Um, Although the salary at Lockheed was nice. I got the pay cut to be a PhD student, but at the end of the day, it's definitely worth it, and I love it.
No, I definitely feel that. As
Yes.
I was contracting at one point, literally earning a lot more than I am as a PhD student, and yeah, that pay cut does hurt.
Yes. Well,
but hopefully there'll be a point where we can both of us go back to either at the same level or more, ideally. But yeah,
look back and laugh on this day. I'm like, you remember that time, Jordan? Well, we made it now. So
but yeah, hopefully live that dream. And so you were talking about that impact side of your research and what you really hope to do with it, that helping people. But specifically, when you think of where your projects specifically going to impact the lives of other people, whether that be families, neonates, or the general medical community, what do you see, or what do you hope will be that impact?
So I hope that my impact, along with my advisors, will be to kind of transform respiratory healthcare. So if we look at just like hemodynamics and hematology, a lot of the blood flow aspects, it's CFD is FDA approved in blood flow. So like a lot of hospitals and doctors, labs, they can use CFD to kind of like help clinically diagnose something. Right now, in airflow and respiratory aerodynamics, we're not quite there yet. And more specifically, like in neonates, where we're working with like rare diseases and well, not necessarily just rare diseases, but like all of these diseases that are common in neonates haven't really been studied from like a computational fluid dynamics perspective. So the impact I want to have with my lab is to get CFD FDA approved, and eventually get doctors like a better understanding. Just have like a extra tool that can help them diagnose diseases currently.
Oh, that sounds very much a worthy impact, as well as I can understand why you're passionate about it. So, on that point of passion, what is the thing that really excites you the most about either your research or currently as a PhD candidate? What is that thing that excites you the most about what you do, more personally rather than the research impact?
Yeah. So what excites me the most, um, more personally, is I'm in a lab, I'm doing all of my research, but actually walking through the children's hospital and like seeing all the kids and everything. I may not work with like I probably work with a few, and it's just their data. But like walking through and like seeing that like research has an impact on families and these kids at the children's hospital. That's what really makes me excited. Um, and at the very least, like, it's helping families, it's helping these babies have a future, where like, sometimes, they are unsure like what the future would look like because, the first few years of life, they're intubated. Um, and, just because they can't breathe normally, now their whole life is affected. Um, so it's really exciting to me, kind of like just seeing the kids on the other side of the hospital. We have a research side and like a clinical side, and, outpatient and everything. And when I walk to go to the MRI machines or the MRI rooms or to the gift shop, the other day I was walking to take an MRI of a neonate, and then a little kid's walking, playing games on his phone. He just looks up at me. He's like, "Hi, how are you?" And I was like, it just made my heart smile. So that's like the exciting part that you know helps me realize that I'm not just a PhD student in a lab trying to work towards a degree.
That's really interesting. And I suppose with your work, you're, I'd imagine, quite interdisciplinary by nature. I'm assuming you work with medics, medical researchers, and equally within your own lab and team, I would presume you would have various different professionals more on the biological side, on the engineering side, computational. I'd imagine that in itself is an interesting challenge to work as part of a probably quite a diverse and dynamic team.
Oh yeah, it definitely is. So I am like part of the University of Cincinnati Biomedical Engineering Department, but I feel like I spend all of my time at the Children's Hospital, and we're in the division of pulmonary medicine. So it's a bunch of PhDs, but we also work directly with neonatologists, pulmonologists. Uh, Actually, some of the people that I work most directly with is the pulmonology people, pulmonologists, medical doctors. So it's definitely very exciting. It's a lot of different viewpoints. Some of us have engineering backgrounds, and some of us, went to med school and have that everything. And it's exciting to see us all come together and work towards a better future.
That's really interesting. And Chris, we're just going to have a bit of a deviation now on to what is normally quite a different part of Sitting Down with Scholars, which is just an opportunity and a bit of a challenge for you to tell your story in 10 words or less with 5 quick fire questions that I won't add any further prompts to, and I just want you to try and answer as quickly and as honestly as you can. And yes, I'm sure there's far more that you would like to say, but just try and keep it to 10 words or less, and then hopefully people can hear more of your expanded thoughts afterwards if you decide to stitch any of that particular segment. So to start off with, what did you want to be when you were younger?
When I was younger, I wanted to be a musician.
And how do you want people to see you today?
Today, let's see, 10 words less. Okay, world traveler who loves to help people.
And can you describe your field or your work in 10 words or less?
Is this a yes or no question, or yeah, it's my field in 10 words less. Biology and engineering meet to create a better healthcare system.
And what is the biggest challenge currently facing your field?
Biggest challenge is maybe subject size.
Okay. And what is a surprising fact about you?
I lived in Germany for 3 years.
One thing I am just going to add, that is the end of the quickfire telling your story in 10 words or less. But I was half expecting something about Quentin Tarantino based on the posters behind your head. So,
One of the best director in the movie history, yeah. These are my 2 favorite ones, Kill Bill and Pulp Fiction. Hateful Eight is also a top one for me.
Yeah, and I've got to admit, the original Ghostbusters, and as I saw when you moved slightly, it's episode 4.
Yep, episode 4. I also have, I don't know if the camera will pick it up, the Millennium Falcon tattoo right here. So,
okay. Big Star Wars fan as well, then.
Yes, big Star Wars fan.
Yeah, definitely the same. Both watching the series, the films, and equally playing some of the, I would say, more the classic games like the Knights of the Old Republic have definitely been a passion project.
Yes. Old Republic and Star Wars Battlefront. Yeah, yes.
Before we go down the rabbit hole of pop culture and TV, which I'm sure we can talk about for a good number of hours, what would you like your legacy to be? So whether as a researcher, as a person, what do you hope that legacy is?
Yeah, so one of the things that I've been involved in throughout my college career, so undergrad and graduate career, is National Society of Black Engineers. So I've always been like trying to inspire next generation of Black engineers to pursue graduate school, to continue in the undergrad education. So I'm definitely a person that likes to give back to the community and be more involved and be an inspiration to keep people going. So I would like my legacy to kind of be like a cross of not really like community service, because I feel like that's like something that you have to do, but like, giving back what I've learned, inspiring the next generation, and leaving scientific impacts. So I want, when all is said and done, and I'm an old man teaching CFD classes, I want people to be like, oh, that's the guy that, helped make a real change in respiratory healthcare. And, because of him and his lab, we can now diagnose things a little bit differently. From hopefully by that time, it won't just be like neonates, but like just spread throughout all ages. So definitely a cross of like Dr. Bowles is an inspiration for our community and where he comes from, but also like he's done very scientific, impactful science.
Really interesting, and it's really encouraging for so many different people to be saying about not only giving back to their community, but that representation side of it, where the community activism, which I think is so much needed in STEM, but in academia in general, because uh, similar to, I'm sure, many different communities, the representation side is a massive barrier for many to be able to go into, whether that's neurodiverse students, first generation, uh, Black, international, non English first language speaking individuals who are trying to get into the fields because they're deeply interested in it, and they want to see individuals that look, sound, and have an element of cultural connection with, which if that doesn't happen, then someone doesn't break through that ceiling first. It just something that is, someone's got to be the first, and someone's got to be the second, the third, the fourth, and so on, because otherwise, that's how you start the dominoes falling of people pursuing the field, or at least as someone who's looked at representation and particularly in education, that's a large bit of what I've seen is an impact that most people either are trying to have or are unknowingly having by just purely being that person for those individuals to look up to. Can you just tell me then a bit more about, from this, what your academic heritages look like? So your experience in your academic journey so far look like, and why you're particularly passionate about encouraging others to follow suit into bioengineering and STEM in general.
Yeah, so particularly for me, I didn't really see a lot of professors that looked like me, or a lot of diversity in general. So I saw that it caused like some of my friends to drop out of the program, or we were seeking assistance with each other, but we couldn't actually go to the professors because we didn't feel that comfortability in a way. So that's kind of like what pushed me to want to do a PhD. Um, my academic journey, I don't think it would have been as successful without the help of NSBE, so National Society of Black Engineers. I helped revitalize the SWE chapter in my undergrad, Society of Women Engineers. It's like just being in a diverse environment and having a lot of different mindsets come together really helped me. Um, and then, the academic journey definitely wouldn't have happened without the support of my parents and my sisters. So they've definitely continued to push me even through the toughest times. But yeah, wanting to do a PhD, I want to give that inspiration to all students in general. And engineering is a tough major as it is, so you need to have a great professor as well.
No, definitely, and it's really interesting, like you say, about the family, the friends, the various different people who are there, whether that be the people who are giving you that advice, they're showing you that they're facilitating your experience, or they're showing you the broader characteristics, behaviors, processes that you hopefully can therefore digest and experience easier because someone's either pointed you in that direction or shown you that side of it. Thinking more on the teaching specifically, how have you found that your supervisors' experience and your PIs and people in the labs, their experience of the research field and respiratory diseases particularly, how has that shaped how you've approached that transition from engineering to more of bioeng?
Primary advisor, he's had like the same exact transition as I have. So he was an aerospace engineer. Um, he worked in F1, like race cars and stuff. Um, and then he went to go pursue his PhD in aerodynamics, and then he got a job at Cincinnati Children's Hospital. So very similar path to me, where I was doing computational work, very engineering heavy background. Um, but there's also like not a pressure, but like a desire that you need to know the biological characteristics that go along with just the engineering side. So that aspect is kind of like helped shape me in a way, because like I'm given a problem, and then my my mind wants to just figure out how I can solve that problem. So I'm like looking at it from different ways and stuff. Whereas like with biology, you have to kind of like remember, you know, all the anatomy and stuff. And then instead of like trying to figure out how to solve that problem, the question is like, okay, this is the result I got from my engineering simulation. Why is it that result? So then it turns into, oh, okay, maybe they have they have a higher resistance in their trachea because you squeeze a water pipe, the water is gonna it's harder to get through. So maybe like their trachea is just their anatomical features show that their trachea is collapsed. So that's why it's a higher resistance. So they kind of help me to see like it's not just problems that we're solving, but like we're trying to explain why as well.
Just picking up on one element of what you said, but taking it in a slightly different way. When you're approaching various different problems, challenges, or trying to navigate that interdisciplinary side, what did you find was the most, I suppose, challenging element of moving from simulation computational sides to more working with particularly live and human subjects, and what's that experience, what's that shift feel like from more of an emotional side?
Like there's two different answers, I guess. There's like a personal side, and then there's like a more scientific related side. So like scientifically speaking, um, I think changed my mindset a little bit was realizing that like these are actually patients that need help. They have actual diseases. I'm looking at MRI. While I'm looking at this MRI, this baby is somewhere struggling to breathe or on respiratory support. And the parents are sitting possibly in the NICU, like wondering, like, oh my gosh, like stressing out and everything because this baby's born prematurely. So it kind of like adds a realistic thing to it, because it's such a like niche field. Whereas like previously in engineering, like yes, I'm building stuff for NASA and stuff, but a team of like the program is a few hundred people. I felt like my part was very small, even though every small part matters. I felt like we're trying to get people to the moon, and if I can't do it, they'll hire another person, and then it's the same mission and stuff. Um, Whereas like this, not everybody is looking to do a PhD to do this type of research.
No, definitely. And I suppose one of the other things, Chris, is obviously where we've met through is through TikTok, through social media, and just thinking more. We've talked a lot about impact, and we've talked somewhat about the message. But what is that message that you want to try to convey, to convince with the content that you put out, with the engagement that you have? What do you hope to achieve?
With my TikTok page, I just want to, and my Instagram, my TikTok is definitely the one that gains a lot of traction. I just kind of want to put like a realistic look on a PhD. So I want people to feel inspired to do a PhD and see that it can be fun. But I also want people to see like, oh man, like Chris, he posted a video that made me think like, like that PhD students, it's not all good, and it's just like any other job. You have your good days, you have your bad days, and then you also have your fun days as well. So like I kind of started it to just like as a blog. So like my main thing was that I'm a PhD student, but I also love to travel. I love to eat food. I have my good days. I have my bad days. A PhD at times can feel lonely. Here's how you can go through that. Surround yourself with a community and everything. So I want it to be like inspiring, but at the same time, like this is a realistic view of what it looks like to be a PhD student, and eventually, going past when I get my PhD.
No, and like you say, I think it's interesting that many people that I've spoken with have started at the PhD as a key point of okay, now I want to talk about it. I want to document it, explain, and a lot of people will probably sitting there thinking, "Oh, there's so many people who they've got this degree, this PhD, they're doing a PhD in this," and whereas I'm not sure if you agree, but I tend to look at it as everyone's story, their perspective is different, everyone's subject is different, and I might not learn uh, ever go into a field such as yourselves, and the essay you would never go into my field, but I feel like I have that little bit of a connection with what you do by absorbing some of your content, and that's the point of why I would love to see more and more PhDs, master's students, bachelor's students get onto social media talking about what they're doing, because that perspective gives everyone else a little bit of an opportunity to have a bit of micro learning rather than doom scrolling type side of it. Or that's at least what I like to see anyway.
Yeah, yeah. And I can definitely agree to that. As long as, like I always say, like the first thing that a lot of people think about is like, you go, like, we're going to get a PhD. Like, oh, you guys going to be in so much in debt. I'm like, well, no, there are fully funded PhDs. That's actually like somewhat of the norm. And then now they're like changing their mindset. They're like, oh, like, you, so you get paid a stipend and stuff. I'm like, it's not, you don't get paid, you get paid like enough to live off of. But, you don't have to worry about like, if you're really passionate about something, you should pursue it, and you don't have to worry about, going more in debt.
Yeah, and like you say, we all know the stipend. It like you say, it gives enough. It could be better. I don't think there's. I don't think I can. I'm going to meet a single PhD student who says, "Oh no, the stipend pays exactly what I need to live off." But it does its job in I would say the basic setting. It allows that access for most people to be able to do a PhD, and I would argue that most of the different degrees I've certainly done, again, not sure if this is the same for your experience, it's probably the more accessible qualification than even in some cases bachelor's and master's degrees, where you are having to fund that. In different countries, you might, particularly international students I'm thinking of here, where they have to pay a stupid amount of debt to be able to fund that, whereas a PhD is more accessible without being, I would say, that highly capable, highly driven student who's managed to secure this scholarship, that scholarship. And I'm sure, I'm not saying that's a bad way to do it, but that's, I would say, more of the exception rather than the norm. Most people can't access those massive scholarships that is going to allow them to have their undergrad and their master's degree completely paid for. There will be some.
Yep, exactly. Yes, yes, I agree.
So I suppose what we're talking about in a roundabout way is something that I always try and ask my various different guests to share their perspective on, which is what would be your piece of advice for someone who's just starting out, deciding what so they're in school, they're thinking, what route do I go? What passion do I pursue? What would be your advice to them?
Yeah, so I would give a few points of advice. I would just first thing try and like see what has shaped you to be where you are today. Like, what things in life have you enjoyed the most, or questions that you've had that you've wanted to see answered and stuff. Because like sometimes, like community engagements, I talk to a lot of students, and they want to be professional athletes, and they just want to make like a lot of money. And what do you guys like? Video games? Like, oh yeah, we love video games. And it's like, so you can be, a content creator, not a content creator, but like video game designer and stuff like that, and that pays a lot of money. And then now you know, their brains are opened up to more different things. So that would be my first point of advice, to see like, what are you interested in, what really drives you, what's your passion, um, and then I would say like, look into different career paths of what you're passionate about. And then my second piece of advice, which I think is like, once you figure that out, is um, to really have like a community to lean on. Because a lot of people just think like, it's X, Y, and Z. If I know what I'm going to do and I plan year one, year two, all the way to year five, this is what I'm going to do. Um, at times it can get lonely. Like it's going to be a lot of mental distress, and a lot of problematic times. So I just say like having a community, really leaning in. It's like the other PhD students, undergrads, master's students, um, leaning on your family, your support system, faith, religion, all of that. That's what will really keep you going forward. And for some people, maybe it's just like getting the PhD, and that's what's going to keep them going. But I know, like for me, it's all of that, uh, family, friends, and religion that keeps me going on like the tough days. So I would definitely say like to have a good support system is what keeps people going.
What would be your point of advice for someone who's they've decided on the passion project that they're planning on pursuing, whether that's academic, professional, but they've now decided they want to showcase it? What would be your advice to someone starting out on social media or on any form of media, not just because there are alternatives than the social media platforms? But
Yeah, I would say the biggest thing for me is just you got to make the videos, like make the pictures, make the videos. Um, to start, I would say, there's an amazing page ran by this guy named Jordan. You can look at his page, but look at other people's pages that you're interested in. So, like, I have a friend; he's interested in fragrances and stuff, but he doesn't know where to start. Um, so, like, we all have access to social media. Just find the people that you like in fashion or fragrances, see how they post their content, and then see how you can like format it to fit your personality. Um, so like for me, it's even currently like I'm still like looking at other people's pages and formatting it to fit my personality, and like trying to like keep the personable side of lab coats and locks um, going. But when I first got started, I was just posting videos randomly, no direction, and then you know uh, I really decided to like get serious about it, and I looked at other people's pages, and that gave me inspiration. I was like, okay, if this person can do it, like I have a story to tell, and I think everybody is very unique, so nobody's content is going to be exactly like somebody else's content. So just feel comfortable to tell your unique story.
and I think that's just pulling up on that point. And I know many different people, particularly the young generation. So when I'm teaching, most of them are both incredibly interested in what the likes of artificial intelligence is going to do to their careers and how that's going to look. But one of I would say, the greatest anxieties that a lot of them have is how they can see people who are representing academia of various professions, but they don't know how they're going to emerge into that if the bottom rung of the ladder disappears. And one of the pieces of advice I try to give is your skills can be copied. Various different people have similar skills to you already. When you apply for a job, they will have various different skills. But it's your experience, it's that story, you as a person. Collectively, there will be similarities, but there will be astronomical differences between your story, your perspective, and someone else's. And that's where the standout characteristic for me is going to be for that next generation who emerges through. Tell your story, what you're interested in, what you're passionate about, and make it in a way that you are both distinguishable from other people because of your story, not because of the characteristics that you're bringing, whether that be skills or qualities, something that makes you stand out as an individual from that story, which is what makes you unique as a creator and as a professional. And from that point, I then want to ask your I then want to ask Chris, what will your question be for the next content educator or researcher about either their research or their content's impact? What question would you like to ask?
I think like the question that I always want to ask whenever I come across a new um, Instagram, TikTok page that's very interesting. I always want to ask like, what are they passionate about? what kind of like the question that you asked me, what do I want my legacy to be? I think that's like a very powerful question, because both like it it brings in like their science, their engineering, or whatever they're into, and it like ties in to what their personal life is as well, and what they're really passionate about. So that would definitely be the question that like I would love to ask the next content creator. What do they want their legacy to be? Um, what are they passionate about? And along those lines, like what do you hope people get from your page? Like if you had to give a 30-second blurb about what your page is and what they're gonna learn from your page, what would that be? Kind of like an elevator pitch in a way.
On the reverse of this, I always ask my previous guests, similar to what I've just asked yourself, Chris, is to share their question. And one of the questions I had from Julia, so my last guest, was, could you share a moment when you were in your field, when you felt confident in your field, and how you managed to overcome that imposter syndrome?
I think for me, I think when I finally felt extremely confident, um, was when I passed my qualifying exam. I think um, even today, I still have like a lot of imposter syndrome. But I guess as I get closer to the end of my PhD, and I'm actually explaining what my PhD research entails and stuff, um, actually, I'll do one better. I think when I started to overcome my uh, imposter syndrome is when some of my videos on TikTok started to go, I guess for me it's viral. For some people it's probably like, oh, this is a daily thing. But if there's a K that appears by the amount of views, I mean that's viral to me. So seeing people in like the comments, yeah, in the comments, and the amount of likes, people messaging me saying, "Oh my gosh, this is amazing research. Thank you so much for the neonatal side of things." I have nurses commenting, and I have like people that are inspired. I'm like, okay, like I actually belong here. I actually know what I'm doing, and I that boosts my confidence a lot when I see that other people are inspired as well.
Yeah, that's interesting. And just before moving on, is one of the things I'd be quite curious of then, Chris, is what's that engagement look like to you in terms of do you have a lot of people who pop up who ask a question in the comments or drop into the DMs, as it would be, to ask for advice, questions? Does that happen a lot?
Yeah, it definitely happens a lot. Um, I think if it just happens at all, I'm excited. So when I see like a lot of comments on a few of my videos, like it gets me excited, and I have like conversations. Like some of my most recent videos, I went to San Francisco for a conference, and I showed my poster, and then a lot of people were like, "Well, we want to check back in after you present your poster next week." And then I was getting messages and comments like, "Hey, it's Monday, it's Tuesday. How did the conference go? How did the presentation go?" So that's how I know it's like really good. In addition to a lot of the students in NESB at my chapter or at my school, and within the Midwest, they always come up to me and ask about my PhD, or I get a random person like, "I saw your TikTok. You make some good videos," and like they start asking me questions about PhD process and the research as well.
And thank you, Chris, for joining me on this week's episode of Sitting Down with Scholars. And I look forward to you joining me in the future and talking to my guests about your academic journey at this point.
Yeah, thanks again, Jordan. And I would look forward to doing this again. In a few months or a year or whatever. Just seeing like where we're both at as well. So this is a lot of fun. Thanks, Jordan.